All right, so we're going to be talking about cueing athletes, or basically just giving them feedback, or coaching points, whatever it might be. And cueing is something that I've heard a lot of great cues or coaching points from other coaches, but I've also heard a lot of negative or not so helpful coaching cues. So depending on where you're at in your career as a coach, whether you're new to coaching, whether you're a veteran coach, uh, minding your own cues and then listening to the cues and coaching of others is really, really important. When I first started, I listened to the cueing of other coaches, and I could tell you exactly what schools they were from because I held them in very high regard. I listened to everything they said, and I tried to kind of mimic the language that they had. At the time, I didn't have the ability to truly reflect if it was good cueing or not. It was just the cueing that I was hearing, and so I decided to use it. As you get a little bit more experienced, you do want to start reflecting on whether the cueing that you're hearing from others is good and helpful and purposeful, or if it's just, you know, not, to be blunt. So there's a couple that I want to focus on in this video to just kind of, uh, provide some insight and just kind of go from there. So the first one that comes to mind is when coaches yell or cue, drive your knee. Now, in this specific instance, driving one's knee can actually be done a couple of different ways. So, the first one that I want to highlight is when an athlete basically just rotates at the hip to get their knee up. And when you do that, there's actually not a whole lot of power that's involved within that knee drive. So when you just rotate at the hips and you just get your knee up, it looks like you're driving your knee, and you might even feel like you're doing the right thing for, quote unquote, drive your knee when a coach says that. But ultimately, in the long and triple jumps, we're looking for powerful, explosive movements, and just rotating at your hips is not really that explosive. It's all about how you use your leg properly. So I think of it more as kind of a leg swing, if you will. Um, in the jumping motion, you're being explosive, almost like you're kicking a soccer ball, if you will, bringing that leg through to drive then up the knee. There's more purpose of the leg, not just rotating at the hips. So again, that cue, in my personal opinion, is one that I have begun to really get away from with athletes. If I do ever use that cue, I've already provided them all of the other insights on what that cue actually really means. And I've told them or taught them the difference of a just simple hip rotation and using a powerful leg motion. So there's a lot behind that. So is the cue terrible? Yes, but only yes if there's no context provided and you didn't give direction prior and you're just yelling, get your knee up, because when you get your knee up, it looks like you're, in the right form or technique, or, you're using the right mechanics, whatever it might be. So, again, that's a cue that I've heard from so many coaches over the years. I've lost count whether they actually did teach their athletes prior to that, what that really meant or not. I'm not quite sure. But again, you listening to this need to be more mindful of that cue and whether you have truly set it up so that athletes understand it and then they perform it properly. The next cue is one that I've talked about actually at a conference I spoke at, and it's one that has really stuck in my head for a long time now, and it really bothered me at the time. I wish actually that I would have approached it. I would have approached the coach and had a quick discussion. But I was at a meet, and in the middle of a jump, as the athlete was about to transition to the landing and get down into the sand pit, their coach yelled, "Make the pit," or "Get in the pit," because they had jumped from a board so far back in the runway that they were barely going to make the pit. And there was a very good chance that that athlete would end up hitting their tailbone on the edge of the pit, and it's something that unfortunately happens more often than you think. And so simply yelling at an athlete to quote unquote get in the pit blows my mind. Like that coach, when he said that, should have instantly, at least I hope, instantly reflected and been like, oh, that's probably not the greatest cue. Because A, me yelling that isn't going to get them in the pit any further. Okay, they're still going to get in by mere inches. And me yelling that also shows that, like, I put them in danger, potentially. And so all I'm saying in regards to a comment like that is, if you have to yell something in terms of like a safety precaution, and I don't know if this coach thought it would motivate the athlete to yell get in the pit, or I don't have a clue how to really truly like reflect on that. If you're yelling something in terms of safety, then you did the athlete a disservice prior to that meet or that situation. So again, a cue like that, one that doesn't belong in the long and triple events at all. So cueing, right? Here's some good ones now. I talk a lot about how to perform a proper start with my athletes. And a lot of times they stand up too quickly. And so we talk about driving outwards more, not in a bounding manner, but driving outwards with good angles to be able to push off the track behind them, down and below. And so, some cueing I might say or talk to them about is, gradual body posture. Talk about where their eyes are at, because their eyes shouldn't pop up right away. They should gradually come up with every step. Things like that. Some athletes come out of their start very kind of like nonchalant. So I talk about turnover and being very aggressive, and that's a cue that I use. Another cueing I might use is to keep their speed through the board so that they don't slow down to take off, or to keep their eyes up, and to provide them, a spot in the distance where they can stare so they're not, looking down and actually physically moving their chin down to look downwards at the board, which will then negatively impact their jump. Some athletes even then flick their head up and back, so they're looking at the sky when they take off, so totally different. So again, I would cue them the same way, to look outwards and in front of them. So those are the kinds of cues that are built into my everyday practice, the things that I talk about with my athletes on a regular basis. I might even cue them in the line from 100 feet away. If I see that they look nervous, just saying something like breathe, or, if I know them and they're the kind of person that does get nervous, I might say something like that, clear your mind, like those kinds of things. But when you're cueing things like drive your knee and get in the pit, in all honesty, those are fairly pointless cues. Um, again, the drive your knee one, unless you've had some context conversations with that athlete, and you've determined that they forget to really be powerful with their leg, and so that's what you're telling them to do. Like, I mean, I guess that could be used, but the pit one, I'll never use, and I hope that none of you do either. So be cautious, or be aware of your cues. Start listening to other coaches around you, even if you're a veteran coach, and determine what are good and not so good cues. Listen for good ones to add into your own repertoire of cueings, or coaching messages, if whatever you want to call it. But listen for those ones that you also want to make sure you never use. Ones that, I mean, possibly even you want to go talk to somebody about and say, that was a negative cue and you put your athlete in danger. I'm really upset that I didn't do that with this specific instance, because I have approached coaches before, and just had a very non-confrontational discussion with them. So I've dragged this out now quite a bit, so I'll end this here. But ultimately, be cautious of your cues, be aware of them, reflect on what's the best use of your time reflecting with athletes. Don't give them too much at any given meet, maybe 1 to 2 total focuses, and then move on. All right. If you have any questions or any, cues that you want to ask about or even provide, you know, me for future chapters or whatever it might be that I could add in the book, I'd love to hear from you.